I know we've got lots of different nurseries joining from up and down the UK and even beyond the UK, as well as those that work closely with the early years sector to support the brilliant work they do around, obviously, as well as the childcare, around making sure those children are having a fantastically healthy start in those critical first few years of their lives. So we're here today with a webinar on how to maintain healthy and sustainable menus while prices rise. I'm sure you're all very familiar with the context of why we're having this call, and we will dive more into that context as we go along. Food for Life's mission is really to make sure that healthy and sustainable food is accessible to everybody, wherever they are in life. For us, we very firmly believe that good food, particularly for children, shouldn't be a postcode lottery. Every child should have access to healthy and sustainable food. And we are working in partnership with schools and nurseries and early years settings up and down the country to make that a reality for as many children as possible. Today we're lucky enough to have Lee Harland with us, who's our nutrition advisor at Food for Life, and she's going to be talking us through some of the ins and outs of certain menu changes that you could make to make sure that you're maximising the nutritional content of your menu while keeping costs low. As well as having Lee on the call today, we've got two of our fantastic Food for Life nurseries that are here to share their examples. We've got Windmill Hill Nursery from Bristol and Lemon Tree Nursery from Hull, sharing their case studies and sharing some practice with you. We're very much hoping that this session is as practical as possible. If you could keep your microphones on mute. We do want this session to be interactive, but just keen to cut down on background noise. Once I finish my intro, I will be turning my mic off. I have got a dog in the background. I'm sure lots of you have got children and work colleagues and animals around you. So we are all familiar with those sorts of interruptions after COVID. So if everyone could mute, but please do use the chat function. If you've got either a question of clarification, if Lee's explaining something that you just want to check in on, Sam will be monitoring that chat. So he can either feed questions that are coming up again and again through to Lee, or he can answer them himself in the chat. We'll have lots of supporting resources at the end of the session, so please do look out for those after the session's happened, and they will help to reinforce some of the points we'll be touching on today. Just trying to move on my slide and it doesn't want to play. Classic tech issue. Oh, there we go. So yeah, the learning outcomes for today's session. We're here together to understand the current crisis we all face relating to soaring energy and food costs within our settings, to increase understanding of the voluntary food and drink guidelines and how to plan and prioritise nutrient-dense menus. We're going to be particularly looking at proteins around that, to increase confidence in planning a menu using cheaper ingredients and varied cooking methods, improve knowledge on plant-based proteins and the benefits of those, and to share best practice between settings. And there will certainly be time for Q&A further on in the session, as well as the two case studies from our Food for Life nurseries. Sorry, trying to move my slide on again. It's not happening. One second. My screen's completely frozen. Sorry. We are going to move on now. Just before we start with the majority of the content, we are going to do a quick collaborative poll on Mentimeter. If you have, if you're on a browser and you can open another window, or if you've got a mobile device with you, you can go to menti.com and type in the poll code 88754343, or just if you can click on that link on the slide, it should take you to that browser window. And this is just a way to make sure we have a sense of everyone who's on the call. Obviously, with so many people, we can't do a kind of round table intro. But yeah, really keen to understand who's on this call and what the priorities are for you at the moment. So I'll give you a minute to get onto that browser, but hopefully if you've gone to menti.com and typed in that code, the first question that should pop up for you is, what are you currently most proud of about your menus? And you can just type in a response and press enter, and you should see on the screen there all of the different contributions from everyone who's on the call. And I suppose the reason we wanted to start with this is really taking a moment for celebration. You're all doing fantastic work up and down the country to feed the small people in your care every day, and there will be real strengths and real bright spots in those menus that you're providing. So I know there's a lot of challenges out there at the moment, but yeah, taking a moment to really celebrate the work you're doing feels so important. So you can see those responses coming through there. We've got flexibility, adaptable, absolutely, real priority, taking in the cultural and dietary needs of different children. And on that note, to say, we know allergies come up a lot for early years settings in these kind of calls, and we're very keen to support on that. The content isn't going to be touching so much on allergies today, but there will be resources about that we'll be sharing, and we will be doing follow-up events around that in the not too distant future. Fresh bread, lovely. This is going to make us all hungry in the couple of hours before tea. Variation, tricks like putting blended chickpeas in a curry to put more proteins into food, fantastic. That sounds right on trend for the topic today. Variety of meal choices on a 3-week rota, all food made fresh from scratch by our cook each day. Well, that is certainly something to celebrate. Good balance of food, so definitely that flexibility and balance coming through, variety. Fantastic. Sounds like they're all getting great exposure there to lots of different ingredients, lots of different dishes, and very importantly, the children are eating them. That's the most satisfying bit of meal provision, isn't it, when you see those clean plates? Suitable for different communities, absolutely. Really wanting to make sure that when we look at adapting and flexing our menus, that they're meeting the needs of all of the children in your care. Okay, I'm going to hopefully, if Menti will play along, move on to the next slide. Okay, so hopefully you can see this next question, which is, describe how you're feeling about the future of food at your nursery in one word. We're all at the start of a winter that there's been a lot of, it's been, yeah, there's been a lot of scary press about obviously prices and cost rises, but yeah. Repetitive, local, fresh. Definitely, we're going to be diving into the local solutions, the opportunities that exist to localize some of your menus and to tap into local suppliers to reduce your costs over the coming months. I know that Louis queued up to talk about that from Windmill Hill. Great, some really positive words coming through there. Excited, confident, diverse. Fantastic to see those responses coming through. Fresh and sustainable. Fabulous. And we'll move on to the last Mentimeter slide, which is What would you most like to get out of today's webinar? Lee's prepared some slides. She's got some great content for you. We've got 2 case studies, but we can certainly check in with these before the webinar ends. And where we haven't met these needs, we can look at sending out some resources afterwards or having follow-up sessions that help to really meet you where you're at right now. So yeah, lots of calls for new ideas and inspirations. You'll be looking forward to your winter menus, got different produce coming in around this time of year. Create exciting and sustainable meals while keeping costs low. Yeah, avoiding food waste, really important part of that. Cost saving and obviously also reducing the environmental impact of your kitchen. That's a good shout. Fresh new ideas, how to provide nutritious food, keeping costs down and maintaining our high standards. Absolutely, that is what we will hope to deliver for you today, and certainly the inspiration for this session emerged because we know so many nurseries that have been doing fantastic work to really look at that nutritional content of their menu, think about the sustainability, the environmental impact of their menus, and we really want to support nurseries to sustain that fantastic work in a more kind of challenging economic situation. So we'll certainly be looking to address that today. Fantastic. Well, really appreciate you getting engaged with that Mentimeter poll. Do keep using the chat as well for anything that comes up for you during the session. And at that point, I'm going to pass over to Lee Harland, who's our trainer here at Food for Life, and she will be running through the content for today's session. So thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks, Chloe. Welcome, everybody. Hiya, I'm Lee. Like Chloe said, I work for Food for Life. I'm the trainer in the training team focusing around nutrition and food quality. So really kind of just delighted really to see so many faces on this screen. It's a massive hot topic at the moment. So hopefully the idea of this session really is to, like what your kind of wishes have been coming through the Mentimeter, really gaining some tips and ideas, some fresh new ideas on how to kind of still have a compliant menu, but reducing your costs and possibly kind of changing or altering bits and pieces on your menus while still remaining compliant where possible. So yeah, as part of my role, I do a lot of support and advice and guidance with settings, early years and schools on kind of menu compliance, and have been working alongside a number of settings on this particular topic around menu development as part of the Food for Life overall award. So I'm really, really happy and delighted to have these 2 case studies with us today. And I think one of the most important things, you know, when on a webinar really is to share really good practice. It's real life. And it's just gaining kind of quick tips, quick wins on kind of what they've done, how they've done it, and let's just share. We're here to share some really good advice and guidance between us all. So really appreciate everybody's time. I know it's kind of the graveyard slot, so I do hope everybody's got a hot cuppa on their hands. It's crucial at this time. And I don't know about anybody else, but I'm turning my camera off because it's a massive distraction. I don't know about anybody else when they present. So I am the face behind the voice, but so we'll kick off. Okay, dokie. Next slide, Happy. So why we're all here. Food and the cost of living. With the cost of living crisis worsening, having access to good food has never been more important. It's absolutely vital at this moment that we all come together to support each other. Nurseries, settings, schools, all provide a nutritional safety net for children. So we are here from Food for Life specifically to support as much as we can going forwards in this crisis. Individual consumers or caterers are certainly not to blame for their food choices. And again, Food for Life believes that as the cost of living crisis continues, there needs to be swift action by government to support public health. And you guys are not to blame for any of this. We need to be a little bit more creative, possibly, going forwards to tackle some of these issues and start becoming familiar with the likes of alternative foods and cooking methods within your settings, within your kitchen, to try and tackle and overcome some of these rising costs of certain foods. And we're here, I've said that we're here to provide additional support and guidance. And if there's anything after the webinar, anybody's got specific questions or queries, I'm sure Sam will pop down my email address in the chat, and do please feel free to kind of send anything my way, and I'll try and help and advise where I can. And really just to say this session is about being supportive and sharing good practice between settings. So thank you both to Lemon Tree and to Windmill Hill for agreeing to come along and talk on this webinar. So just before I do introduce you to our first case study, next slide, Hattie, please. I just wanted to kind of really set the scene around why we're here, but what foods, just picking out some of the current foods where we've seen a dramatic price increase. And these are the foods, the particular products that might be causing you a little bit of grief in terms of developing your menus and ordering things in. So just a little bit of background. So food and energy costs have never been so high. And they really are having a massive impact on our menus. So the first one here that I'm sure you've seen an increase in all of them, but poultry. So the price of UK's most popular meat is rising faster than any other protein. This price shock is caused by, we're all familiar with the Russian-Ukraine war. Chicken feed has rocketed in price, where prices from the farm have already risen by 50% in 1 year, which is huge. The ingredients that go into chicken feed include the likes of soya and sunflower meal, which is actually a byproduct of sunflower oil, and wheat, and all of these have risen in price. In normal times, Ukraine and Russia are the major sunflower oil and wheat producers, so it wasn't an issue. Beef has risen massively, again, over 20% between October 2020 and October 2021. The price of beef is now outpacing the increasing price of pork, which is 14% more expensive than what it was currently last year. So massive increases with poultry and beef. Flour. Again, I'm sure you've seen an increased cost in flour. So basically, these prices are caused by the atrocious weather in North American wheat growing areas back in 2021, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine and rising fuel costs as well. Pasta, which used to be one of our cheapest staples, has gone up, increased by almost 50% in 1 year, which is phenomenal. Oil, down to the poor harvests in South America and COVID-related staff shortages, has had a massive impact on the price of oil. Rice, due to supply chain disruption, the lack of freight trains, and serious drought in varying areas. And eggs. So egg prices could rise for UK consumers as farmers cut their flock numbers. Consumers could be hit with higher egg prices as UK farmers reduce their flock numbers in response to basically the escalating costs and no profit margin. The rising costs in feed, energy and labour are all having a massive impact on the cost of eggs for caterers. So I just wanted to kind of highlight the products that we're kind of looking at, and I'm sure we're all seeing a huge increase across the board with these particular products, and just the reasons why this is happening. And you know, it's been in the news, it's in the press, we're hearing about it all the time. So within Food for Life, we're trying where we can to support you guys and give you some kind of just alternatives to work towards. So next slide, please, Hattie. So before we actually get into the real content about kind of plant-based proteins and alternative cooking methods and foods and recipes and things like that, I wanted to introduce Jackie and Catherine from Lemon Tree Nursery in Hull. A huge thank you to both Jackie and Catherine for coming on, and they're going to talk to us about their Food for Life journey. So far, they're at the very start of their Food for Life journey, and we've been working together over the last few weeks on menu development, and you know, kind of backwards and forwards with products and recipes, and it's been a really inspiring journey to date. So I'll pass you over, and Jackie and Catherine, if you're happy to talk through your slides. Hattie's monitoring the slides going forward, so when you're ready to move on to the next slide, if you just give the call.
Okay, hello.
Thank you.
Hi. I'm Jackie. I'm Catherine, the cooker. Okay, if we could have the first slide then, please. Okay, so what inspired us, this is one of our nurseries. What inspired us to make the changes? It's something that we've wanted to do for a long time, but we actually, both of us attended the last webinar, and I think that gave us the final sort of push to get us going, really. So if we could have the next slide, please. So what was in place when the nursery was taken over? So in 2013, we took over the nursery, and the meals that were on offer in the nursery were provided by the local schools. So we used to go and pick the food up every lunchtime, and it was already done for us. It was cheap. It was only £1 per head. So obviously I didn't have any costs for a cooker or anything like that. But we were beginning to realise more and more that the food that was on offer really wasn't appropriate for the under fives, despite the schools knowing that they were cooking for under fives. And I think the final nail in the coffin was when they introduced a big breakfast onto the menu, and the bacon was like shrapnel, and there was just no way our little 9-month-olds were having any or going anywhere near it. So that was kind of one of the big ones. It wasn't very inviting, and we knew that we needed to really look and change what we were doing. So, and then on top of that, a parent actually came to speak to me to talk about what was being offered in the baby room, so in our 0 to 2 room. And that really kind of made us sit up and listen. And I think, like the majority of us in nurseries, as much as we always want our food to be right for the children, there's always pressures to make sure our education's in place and that we're doing all the things that we need to do to care for our children, but also to educate our children. So there's always other pressures that come, and it kept kind of getting put on the back burner a little bit. But that was kind of the two big things, the menus that were coming through from the schools and also parents speaking to us.
So we feel it's important because obviously food does impact your health, motivation and well-being, not just adults but children as well. So the area that the nurseries are situated in is an area of deprivation. So many of the children would be eligible for free school meals anyway. And then we're sort of thinking of a lot of families, it's quite hard to prioritise food as being important for the children. And they would maybe just, not to say that all do, but nugget and chips, that's like what you mainly hear that a lot of children have. But also there's a time issue as well. So we just sort of feel that if we can provide that one meal a day, at least one meal that's substantial, nutritious, then we feel like we're doing okay, really. Obesity as well, along with dental health, is a national concern. So we do toothbrushing as well. So obviously we do like the healthy eating, talking, and just sort of introducing the words and the communication for children to know about being healthy.
Yeah, making sure that those meals are nutritious and support all of that as well going forward. Could I have the next slide, please? So we decided we were going to hire a cook and start sorting out some recipes. So we moved away from the school as the suppliers and we hired a cook. It is more expensive. However, we believe that it makes the nursery more appealing. It's lovely to be able to say that the meals are cooked on site. The recipes over the years have changed, and that's been kind of governed by how much waste we've had, how much costings of recipes. So we've tried to change them as we've gone along, really. So that was the process of just hiring Catherine and sorting out the recipes.
So when we sent our menus along to Food for Life, we were pleasantly surprised that we weren't too far off meeting the percentages that we needed to be compliant. But we knew there was something. It was when we sent the product information, we knew that the food wasn't at the standard that it should be, really. And the reason why we probably opted for the cheaper versions really was the cost. Obviously, food that's doesn't contain usually the right ingredients is cheaper. So we also found out that tin tuna isn't sort of an oily fish, which we maybe didn't think that it was. So we sort of have to try and fit that into our menu, and also baked beans as well. We had those probably at least on every menu.
A couple of times a week.
Yeah. So
they've been ditched.
Yeah. So now we're looking for hopefully we found a red tractor, and we checked as well for the fish that we get, just to make sure that it was on the sustainable list, and we were all right with that. So yeah.
I think it's been a big learning curve for us going through the menus with Lee, really. It's really helped us, hasn't it? And learning about things like the tuna not being an oily fish, because we would have assumed it was and had it with a jacket potato. So we thought, yep, we've done that one. But that wasn't the case. So we've learnt a lot as well along the way, which has been nice. But how much do these little ones eat? So when we've started to look at the portion sizes, and knowing that they have to have 250 grams a day of either fruit or veg or a combination of. So I've jokingly suggested that perhaps we should just attach a nose bag and let them trough throughout the day. But joking aside, adding things to our menus. So now we know that they need a pudding after lunch and a pudding after tea. But what that actually has to contain, because you automatically think, crikey, that's going to push the costs up. But between tweaking our snacks and adding some of these frozen fruits that we probably wouldn't have used before, and tinned fruits, it's actually, not really altered things a massive deal. So, and yeah, they're eating everything pretty much that's been put in front of them. So this, we're slowly taking things forward. Rome's not built in a day, so we're adding things slowly, making sure that the children like them, and then going with it or changing it if they don't. Can we have the next slide, please?
Yeah. So the red tractor, that was obviously, like I did mention, we knew that the food needed to be changed. So, and as an example, the minced beef, the Red Tractor minced beef is more expensive, but it is better quality. So what we've done is we're starting slowly to replace what I would buy as a pack of mince with lentils. But we're just finding that when we shop at Asda, and sometimes you just get sent like substitutes, and they're not always the right ones. So and you can't always find the cheaper versions. So that's just something that we're looking at now, is whether we have to actually go into the shop or a different shop and buy the cheaper tins, really. There's what is it, Napolina, or the tin of lentils is £1, but we know you can get it for 50-60p. So to start with, I did have a recipe for bean balls from Lee. I didn't have it all to hand, so I just did my own thing, and instead of it being bean balls, it was like a spag bol, but it went down really well. So I was in a bit of a panic of like, oh no, it's not worked, but the children loved it. So they all sort of like, more please, more please. So it ended up being all right, to be fair.
Yeah, it's been quite an eye-opener, really.
Yeah.
Just changing sort of, say, 30% of the meat we've replaced with
Jackie, your mic's gone. You're on mute.
Somebody must
Sorry,
have
that's
muted us. We've got on too long.
On now. Yeah, the baked beans, we now have mixed bean salad, which at first we were a little bit like, oh, are the children going to like it? They did like it, so that's not been an issue at all. Tin salmon, I'm gradually going to add that to our fish pie. The children love fish pie, so why would we change it? Let's just add something to it, and obviously the salmon was ideal to add, and it gets our oily fish in. And basically any meal that we have minced beef with, that contains minced beef, I put lentils in with it just to bulk it out, and so far it's gone down really well.
Yeah, and from my point of view, from the costings point of view, we've not noticed a massive increase in the shopping because of making these small changes elsewhere. It's kind of balanced it out, but we're meeting the criteria, so we know that the children are getting, well, better products, I suppose. So could we have the next slide, please?
So feedback, obviously from the children themselves, the way that I know whether they've enjoyed it or not is whether it's gone in the bin or whether it's been eaten. So at the minute, 9 times out of 10, they're eating it, so that's quite good. We do offer alternatives if there's any children that don't eat, but touch wood, at the minute I'm not doing many alternatives.
No, they're doing really well with it, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, like Catherine said, we don't need any words. It's either in the bin or in the children. So it's, you know, it's very easy to see. From a staff point of view, the staff are often saying that the children are eating better, that they're eating really well. And I think Catherine's just alluded to the fact that she's not doing many alternatives. So that means even some of our picky eaters are now eating better. And I'm chief taste tester, so I can really vouch for the beef cobbler that Catherine makes with the added lentils. It's absolutely delicious. With regards to the parents, as Lee said, we're at the beginning of our journey, so as yet we've not started to share too much. They've had menus previously from us, but what we've wanted to do is make sure that we've tried everything. So adding the oily fish, adding the salmon to the fish pie, going through the recipes a couple of times, and then when we can confidently say yes, your child does eat this, then we can share those recipes with the parents and hopefully inspire them to have a go at home with some products that perhaps the children might have turned their nose up at previously. Because obviously we'll be able to say, well, actually, yes, your child does eat lentils, and yes, your child does ask for seconds. More often than not.
Yeah.
Could we have the next slide, please? Okay, so what's next then? So we want to continue adapting our recipes. One of the things that, again, that we've learned during our short time doing this process is that we want to look for an alternative to corn, which hopefully we might find one today, because I assumed that eating corn was good for you, but apparently it's not that great. So that's obviously something else that we want to look at. We'd like to look at including more seasonal recipes, so adapting some of the veggies that perhaps go alongside what we're offering, to make use of what's probably cheaper in the supermarkets at that time. And then really we just want to continue learning, really, and start putting our portfolio together. And that's us.
Thank you so much, guys, for coming on and sharing your experience and your learning so far. It's been brilliant working with you so far, and the changes that you've made have been phenomenal. But I think the biggest thing is actually the reaction from the children. When we first had the initial discussion around kind of adding brown and green lentils to things, it was a bit like, what? These little foreign bodies? But actually the positive feedback is great going forwards, and we'll talk about that kind of as we go through the next couple of slides. So yeah, huge thank you. So you can rest now, but if anybody does have any questions that they did want to ask Jackie or Catherine, please pop anything in the chat, and I'm sure throughout the presentations or even after the webinar, they'd be happy to talk to you about anything. Yeah. Okie dokie. Thank you. Hattie, can I have the next slide, please? So I'm conscious of time. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to whiz through some of these kind of slides. Everything that you've got that you'll see today, you'll actually get a copy of after the webinar. So don't worry too much about that. So basically, this slide here is the government, the guidance document that I hope that all of you are familiar with. This should be your Bible, albeit quite a long one. So the guide's been developed to help early years providers and practitioners to meet the early years foundation stage welfare requirement for the provision of healthy, sustainable food and drink. And it ensures that meal and snack provision provide the correct intakes of protein, fat, carbs, vitamins, iron, zinc, calcium, for example, all of the crucial nutrients for a child's health. Next slide, Catherine, please. So when planning menus in the early years settings, the guidance quite clearly states that all children, if they're staying for a full day, there should be provision for breakfast, lunch, tea and snacks, and 2 to 3 snacks per day. And when we were having the conversation with Jackie and Catherine, when you actually count up how much food is being provided for a child, it's almost like, oh, they're just having breakfast. A couple of minutes later, it feels like, oh, they need fed again. They need fed again. Oh, it's snack time. It's a constant vicious cycle these children need for good nutrient dense health. Next slide. So like we've mentioned about meal provision within Food for Life, it's in addition to the standards and the early years foundation guidance, Food for Life looks really carefully at sustainable food and its provision. So I'm hoping today's session will actually guide you and look at some of these things and aspects of the award, but also how we can comply with these standards whilst reducing our costs, and talking about things like cooking methods, increasing our pulses. And when we talk about plant-based proteins and pulses, we mean the likes of peas, beans, lentils, chickpeas. There'll be a lot of chickpeas and lentils hopefully kind of being introduced into menus over the next weeks and months. Less but higher quality meat, using tinned products, using tomato-based sauces, cooking in bulk, batch cooking, things like that, that we're going to be looking at. Next slide, Hattie. Okay, so this slide here just has been taken from the guidance. And the voluntary food and drink standards focus on the 4 main food groups, which I'm sure we're all aware of. So the yellow is your carbs, fruit and veg is your green, your protein or your peas, beans, lentils, pulses are your pink, and your dairy and your alternatives are your blue. The one that we are going to focus quite heavily on today is the pink, which is our protein. And some of the foods that we need to start looking at, not addressing them all, and this session certainly isn't to, you know, to rip to shreds your menus at all. That's not the idea of this. It's just to highlight where some changes could possibly be made to reduce the costs within your menus. So the likes of your meat and your poultry. In the case of Lemon Tree, when they've reduced the minced beef and replaced with lentils, and things like that as we kind of go down the list. So it might be that, you know, this next menu cycle that you're actually looking at changing the cooking method and not the product to reduce the costs, because we can't do everything. We've got to take one step at a time to be able to make some significant change. Next slide, Hattie. So this slide here, again, it's all within the standards, and if you haven't already got it to hand or downloaded it, I just recommend you do. And it's very visual as well, so it gives you portion sizes, and this one here, looking at, this is the protein. So protein in a child's diet is crucial for growth and development, and it's recommended that children have 2 portions per day, 3 if there's a vegetarian child. So we'll look at protein in a little bit more depth in the next couple of slides. And really the aim is that we're looking to see more and more plant-based proteins on our early years menus, because they really are a cheaper alternative to meat and poultry. The message here is not to remove meat completely off the menu. It doesn't have to be that, but reducing them with the likes of your peas, beans and lentils. Next slide, Hattie. And obviously, I'm literally just going to kind of mention the Food for Life Award, but as part of your menu development and having a compliant menu, just remember that this does actually ticks off your some of the criteria for the food quality section of your Food for Life Award. So, like again, Lemon Tree have mentioned, they looked at their the animal welfare, they looked at changing the lower quality meats to a red tractor, the MSC fish, making sure that that was compliant, and looking for more of the recipes and meals being freshly prepared to meet the 75% target for that. Next slide, Hattie. So this slide here is just things to watch out for, and UPFs actually stands for ultra processed foods. I'm not going to go into depth. Ultra processed foods could be a webinar in itself. It's huge. There's a national campaign about to be launched in the new year all around ultra processed foods. But I've just popped it in here just to be aware of some of the products that do sometimes, quite often, creep into settings. They might be in a packet form, they might be in wrappers, they might have a kind of wafer texture, they might have a kind of puff-like texture in terms of crisps and things. They are very expensive. But also they're very hyper palatable, which actually encourages children to eat and want more of these products. But they can be full of all sorts of kind of additives and colorings and the nasties that we are avoiding in the Food for Life world. So just to be aware for any alternative children or any diets, for the likes of nuggets, corn products, for example, all these types of meat substitute products, just be very careful with regards to kind of the ultra processed message around them, and choose natural where possible. And really the key message here is going right back to basics, and that's what I keep saying to settings. We need to really be moving right back to kind of real cooking methods, cooking from scratch, using simple, healthy, wholesome ingredients to provide and to feed these children as quickly and as healthily and cheaply as we possibly can. Okay, next slide, Hattie. So ensuring protein content remains high in meat-free meals. So here we're going to be looking at the actual benefits of proteins and plant-based proteins. Next slide, Hattie. So with the cost of living crisis hitting individuals and settings hard, the likes of these plant-based proteins will be making a huge appearance, hopefully, on menus more and more, and actually start becoming the norm. So this, personally, I think this is a real positive outcome. And we should be thinking of it really as a positive rather than a negative. Plant-based proteins are really flavoursome, they're palatable, they're cheap, they're easy to work with, we can store them easily, they're accessible, and actually from some of the feedback from settings is that the children quite like them. Possibly it's quite often the case where it's the adult that's actually saying, oh no, not keen on those little foreign objecty type things. But actually, if you're, for example, in the case of beef mince, a lower quality beef mince can quite often be quite chewy if it's not cooked properly. The texture can be quite gristly, but actually if those are replaced, or if that's replaced with the likes of a soft lentil, a brown or green lentil, they absorb the flavors, and actually for a child they become quite palatable, and the child becomes quite familiar with it and enjoys it. So that's the feedback so far, which is good. So lots of positives around plant-based proteins, and again there's documents and some supporting evidence that'll be sent out alongside the webinar after this around kind of the benefits of plant-based proteins. Next slide, Hattie, please. So I've just popped in here a recipe that I use quite a lot in settings, recently more so, and this came about because a couple of settings have been serving the likes of chili con carne on menus, and becoming obviously the cost issue with the meat. So we've come up with a quick, easy, high protein, accessible, healthy, tasty recipe that works. And again, it's a quick tomato and bean soup. The beans, when we first initially kind of launched this recipe, it was very much a case of, oh, these beans are far too big. So what we did was we just developed it slightly, and we've pulsed them down. Just a hand blender, really quick, really cheap. You don't have to have any fancy equipment to be able to do this. And actually it makes a really nice thick texture using beans. And then as time has gone on in this particular setting, they've started maybe blitzing half of the beans and then adding in the whole bean, just so that they're becoming familiar with the actual protein, and it's not so much as a foreign body. And in this case they've used borlotti beans. So that was just an example of a really nice recipe that's gone down well. Next slide, Hattie. So we've got a video which we're just going to pop the link into the chat, and you can just at your leisure. There's a couple of short videos. There's a hummus and there's lentil soup as well that you can just watch. They're quite jazzy. They've got nice music, and they show you just kind of how straightforward and easy it is to come up with a plant-based recipe. And that actually the children can get involved with as well. They can make it as an activity, and then serve it as part of a snack. So I'll leave you to click on the YouTube links on those at your own leisure. Next slide, Hattie, please. Okay, so cooking methods and their costs. We've talked about products. We've talked about the rising costs of the actual product and the food itself. But not to forget the actual cooking method, and it's all over the press. Don't need to say anything more about that. But this slide just gives an understanding, I suppose, of the dramatic difference in cost when it comes to cooking. It really, really shocked me, even though I was aware from the difference in cost between a conventional cooker at, for example, 87 pence a day, right down to microwave cooking at 8 pence a day. So when I saw this, my slow cooker, let me tell you, has come out of its cupboard, and we have been slow cooking everything in our family. So just really to show you the difference. It's not to say you're now not to use your your oven within your setting, and you've got to go back to microwave. That's not the messages here at all. The message here is, if you do have some of these appliances, for the likes of a slow cooker or microwave, it's a case of kind of having a look at your recipes and having a look at which recipes we could actually use these appliances for, to save a little bit of time, a little bit of fuel cost as well. So some tips that I've can pass on really are, so any sort of kind of sauce that could be made, freshly made sauces, can be made the day before, or soups, for example, in a slow cooker. They can then be batch cooked, frozen, and then brought out on the day of use, and can be heated through a microwave rather than on a gas cooker or on the electric cooker, to save some costs. Simmer cooking rather than boiling to save energy as well is a good one. I've mentioned microwave sauces to heat rather than hob heating, which really is expensive. Microwaving the likes of jacket potatoes, and I know it's a jacket potato in the oven, maybe it's just a personal thing, is so much nicer than one from a microwave, but you've got to remember that these children have got really quite precious textures and tastes, and a microwave jacket potato to a 2 or 3 year old is much more pleasant than a real crispy, crunchy jacket potato in an oven. So actually for that child, that method of cooking in a microwave probably suits them best. And then air fryers tend to be, at the moment, I think the kind of like the in appliance. Everybody wants their hands on an air fryer. So again, this isn't me saying go out and buy yourself an air fryer, absolutely not. But if you've got one, for example, in your setting, or you've got one at home and you think, well, we could maybe use that for a certain dish, then there's no reason why you couldn't. Air fryers are a really good appliance if you know how to use them properly, and you know of healthy recipes that you can use within an air fryer. I think sometimes the message with an air fryer is that they can only be used for nuggets or sausages or burgers or things like that. You can do all sorts in an air fryer, but it's knowing how and what recipes are suitable to that. Yeah, if you just to give you a few tips really on different methods of cooking in within your menus. Next slide, Hattie. Okay, so I've just got a very brief activity that we're not going to do it as a group. I just want to use the chat function, or if you're sat next to somebody, possibly having using the chat function, sorry. Just want you to, I'm going to pop some lunch options and some tea options onto the next slide, and I just want you to have a think. Just pick one. We don't have time to do them all. Just pick one, and I just want you to think about the alternative ingredients that you could use to save some costs, the alternative cooking methods that could be used, and then any other kind of suggestions for additional cost savings. So it might be the likes of buying in bulk, any bog offs, buy one get one frees if you come across them, if you've got the storage to space to store them, things like that. So it might be grow your own. Okay, next slide, Hattie. So there's lots of options here for lunches and teas, and these have been taken from First Steps Nutrition Guide. So these would be your typical kind of dishes that settings might offer on their menus. So for example, let's just go, I'll start you off, I'm just going to pick goulash, for example. So goulash tends to be made with kind of steak mince, vegetables, and possibly cooked in a conventional oven, traditionally. So how would we kind of possibly use different alternative ingredients and cooking methods? for that kind of dish. So I've just noted down here that this could definitely be a dish that you could slow cook. You could get it all prepped the night before, leave it on to slow cook, and it'll be ready the next day. Just pop everything in, replacing the meat with the likes of beans. So kind of slightly bigger beans, like butter beans, are a great source of fiber, protein, plant-based options. Very cheap to buy and easy to cook with. So it just gives you kind of something to think about. So it might be that after the webinar or in a couple of weeks' time, you actually get your menus out and you think, right, okay, what is it? You don't have to change every single dish on your menu, absolutely not. But there might be some specifics that you could change going forwards. Okie dokie. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, just in the chat, just popped a question here that what changes are settings currently making to tackle some of these cost of living crisis, to tackle the cost of living crisis? Is there anything that you guys are already doing out there that you could pop in the chat, just to food for thought, really? We've mentioned reducing meat on the menu. I've mentioned batch cooking, for example. Some settings are starting to either grow their own or starting to think about growing their own. Freezing product dishes, so soups and sauces. Yeah, using local seasonal produce in dishes. Shopping locally where possible is a good one. And yeah, like the likes of planning ahead is crucial, because it's very easy to just think, oh well, we'll just have that and we'll just have that and we'll grab this, and actually not think about the overall cost. So some great ideas, so keep them coming throughout the next presentation, just to kind of put some ideas down. That would be great. Excellent. So what we're going to do now, we're just going to take a break from me talking, and I'm going to pass you over to Louis from Windmill Hill Nursery in Bristol. And thank you to Louis for your time. And Sam, over to you. Okay.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I'm just going to introduce you quickly, Louis, and then let you take the floor. So Louis came to work with Windmill Hill Nursery last year, and we started working with him on the Food for Life Early Years Award. And we thought that he brought like a really fresh look at the menu and the setting. I think perhaps part inspired by his previous work on organic farms, but it was his approach to sourcing that sort of really caught our eye, and so I know he's going to speak a little bit about that today, but I think he's also got some other things he's going to cover, and I'm really looking forward to it. So the floor's yours, Louis. Thanks very much.
Hi everybody. Been some really good points so far, and it's nice to hear what everyone's doing, and about adding in lentils and other pulses. I would be really interested to know where people are getting the lentils and pulses, because I've been using a company called Essential, and this was the first thing I did when I got the job, was change over some. So I think I was quite lucky coming into the job, because the previous chef was making a lot of fresh food already. And the menus mainly fresh food, but the suppliers were, for me, like not organic enough. I really wanted to provide organic food for the children, and when I was younger, I lived on a community farm, and we used a company called Essential, which is a cooperative, and they supplied bulk of lentils and anything you'd want, really. And buying bulk and dried been something that's really saved for me on rice and flour and yeah, these grains and beans that we're talking about being really important in the menus. So that was a really important thing, and I've got some links to send out to you of how to get an essential account logged on and start sourcing from them. And there's also a company called Hodmedod's, which I was using, which basically supplies UK, yeah, it supplies all UK grains, and they're really good because it's, again, local. That's really important, and it's cheaper to buy these grains like this. So Hodmedod's, if then that's really good. Another thing I was doing was supplying from a local organic wholesaler, and I got in touch with them because I wanted to get more organic veg, and I asked them if, basically, because I've worked on organic farms, I know that sometimes there is a glut is what you call it, of vegetables or produce. So I knew about that, and I thought, well, maybe I could use some of that because I know that prices are going up. So I got in touch, and they said they were really excited about that, and it was great to start that communication with a local wholesaler, especially with organic food, because that's really good for children, nutrient dense, and it's got no glyphosate in it. So I was getting their stuff that they couldn't sell to people because it's, say, starting to go a little bit off, or it's going to go off in the next day, and they're not going to be able to sell it because they've got lots of it. And I was thinking, why don't more nurseries do that? That's that's a good idea. Yeah, and and I think continuing connection with those farms. Obviously, in Bristol, I was using a whole food shop, whereas if you're in a more rural setting, you could actually get in touch with your local farm, and then you'd have more connection with your local food and the people that are growing around you. So I've made a template for an email you could send to a local farm, and I've found a list of organic farms in the UK that you could get in touch with, and because that's what I did, and I thought and really, like, your own intuition and ideas about what farms are local to you anyway is going to be best. So if you know there's a farmer or something, or you know that there's a shop, just think that first, because the list is really long and hard to sort through. But like, get in touch with them, basically. Get in touch with local people, cut out the supermarket, the middleman, and get the veg from local people, and that will create connections that maybe will keep going. And you could have someone from the farm come in and talk to the kids or something, and you could tell the kids this was grown just down the road, and that's what I was doing. I mean, I was really lucky because I was working on a community farm. So the setting, Windmill Hill, is on a community farm. So we had those educational assets, like, really in spades. So what else is on there? Yeah, I was definitely cooking a lot less meat. So I was cutting down the meat, like you said, and trying to supply better meat. I think the chef before me was doing about 8 kilos to feed 70 to 80 children, and I cut it down to 6 and added, again, like chickpeas into curries, and I was making burgers and adding lentils and onions and that sort of thing. So that's really important. And another thing that I found really good for tackling food waste was when cook something like especially rice. It's often easy to cook too much rice. Having that as an element in your menu the next day, if you can get the rice, the leftover, refrigerated quickly, then you can make, say, you had a curry one day, you can make a kedgeree the next day with smoked haddock, and that was what I was doing, and that was a really good way to use that excess rice. And another thing was using greens. I found really important because they contain a lot of the vitamins and minerals that you might be losing from having meat. And so if you've got these beans and you've also got the greens, that creates a really balanced diet. And ways of getting that in that I was using was putting it in my pasta sauces. So pesto is something that kids are really used to and they love. And what I do with my pesto is add spinach and kale. And another thing I used to thicken my sauces and add nutrients was sunflower seeds and pumpkin seeds, which are full of all of those proteins and vitamins. Are really good for you, and those can go in any sort of pasta sauce, and they're really, I think, really good for bulking up the nutrient density of things when you're not having meat, and also it's good for. There's not that many children. You'd have to ask who, like parents specifically, who are allergic to sunflower seeds and pumpkin seeds. It's quite rare, so those are good things. We're not being able to use nuts. I had a nut-free kitchen in time. That was really important. Yeah, so the main things is just soaking your, so for me, it was soaking the beans and lentils myself, getting them dry and soaking, and connecting with local suppliers. And I think that'll make prices a lot cheaper. And I sent Sam my menu so he'd send it over if people want to look at it. And I was yeah, I've left that job now, which is a real shame because we had to move out of Bristol. But I'd like to continue helping in this sector because I'm really passionate about it. So if anyone wants to talk to me about it, I'm totally up for talking about it. I really love to share more ideas with people if people want to get in touch with me and help finding local suppliers in your area and stuff like that. I don't know how long I've talked for. I'm kind of coming to an end now, I think.
That was brilliant. Thanks, Louis. Thanks very much. And we will put the materials that you've put together for us. We'll make sure that they're all available for everyone that's on the webinar in the resources that we send out after. So thanks very much.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Louis. That was really, really informative. Thank you. Patty, can I just have the last slide or two? So yeah, just before we finish, I just wanted to pop on some of the resources that you guys will take away at the end of this session. So some suggested recipes that we've worked with in various settings. So the likes of a 2-ingredient pizza, where the actual children can get involved using a flour and a yogurt. 2-ingredient flatbreads, banana pancakes as a kind of protein option for breakfast or snacks, the homemade hummus, which you've got the video link now for, vegetable fritters. All of these are really, really quick plant-based recipes bean balls, which Lemon Tree have tried and tested, the falafel burgers, and there's a recipe in there for an aloo tikka potato cake, and they're absolutely delicious. All of these recipes have been trialed and tested in an early year setting, and they've gone down really, really well. So as part of your resources, you will get these recipes sent out to you to use and try, and really to encourage the children. Once that you can do it as an activity within the settings, but also to try and encourage parents to come in, or even to send out a recipe if you're changing something on your menu. Just let the parent or the grown-up at home aware that you're doing menu development. Invite them in if you can. If you can't, send the recipe back in a newsletter, with a little bit of homework. Have a go, make this at home with your child, because this is going to be introduced onto the menu in the next menu cycle, or whenever it might be. So there's lots of recipes coming your way after the session, and I think it's the last slide, Hattie. I'll skip over this one, but there's lots and lots of recipes and questions I get about non-dairy proteins for vegetarians. Again, I've just listed loads of recipes that I've got, that if anybody has specific requests for those, then I can send them to you, no problem. And Sam's put my email address in the chat at the start, so please do just ask if anybody's needing some suggestions. And then the last bit is, so where are we going from here? So really, although we're going through what is a really challenging.
Lee, you've got unmuted.
Oh, I'm on mute, sorry. Yeah. So yeah, just the turning point here. So where are we going from here? We know that we're going through a real challenging period at the moment, with regards to kind of eating habits and costs of products, and energy bills and rising, costs. But we really do, I've mentioned it earlier, that I really do think this is a positive, and with regards to kind of overall child health, and where we're going, introducing more plant-based proteins into dishes, for kind of longer term health, and we don't want to be seeing these little objects like your black-eyed beans or your lentils or your peas or your black beans being what we kind of currently think of as a foreign body within dishes. We want them to become the norm, and we want children to actually, one, be able to know what they are, and two, become really familiar with the textures and the tastes, and really have a go at kind of experimenting new recipes and introducing kind of a little bit more excitement maybe on your menus, using some of these plant-based proteins. Okay, next slide. Oh, so thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. I hope that's given you just even some top tips, some ideas, maybe just to think about, whether it's your cooking methods that you might want to think about, or whether it's the actual kind of reducing the costs of certain products on your menus. I'm here always at the end of the phone or in an email if anybody does want to ask any questions. You will be sent a bank of resources, but before that, I'm just going to pass you back to Chloe, just for the last little bit. Thank you.
Fabs, thank you so much, Lee, and thanks particularly to Lemon Tree and Louis from Windmill Hill for coming in and sharing your really practical examples. We will be writing those up into case studies, and I'll check them out with you before we send them out. Lemon Tree team and Windmill Hill team, just to check you're happy with how we've captured that. But thank you so much. As Sam mentions, we've run out of time today. Didn't really want to cut people off because there was so much useful content, but there are some questions in the chat about baked beans and freshly prepared menus, about lentils, about the health of microwaves, and lots of really interesting questions about the implications of using different cooking methods and the costs of those. So we'll send through some follow-up information about that in the resources that will come out to everybody who's registered for this webinar. So please don't think we're ignoring your questions, just wanted to make sure that we had time for those case studies. So we will review everything that's in the chat and make sure that all of those questions are answered. And if we could ask you to do one thing for us, it's so helpful if we get your feedback on these webinars to evidence the value of the work we're doing to funders and partners, and to justify the case for putting on more webinars like this so that other nurseries can benefit. So if you could follow that form, it's just 3 very quick questions that will automatically be captured at our end, and they just ask you to just do some quick rating questions and just let us know about something that you might do differently as a result of joining us today. So yes, just a massive thank you to everyone that's been chipping away in the background as well. Hattie doing a fantastic job getting everything set up in the background, and Sam keeping the chat moving. And as I say, particularly to Lee, Jackie and Catherine and Louis for the brilliant content that you've brought for us today. So thanks very much, everybody. I'm sure you're very hungry after all of that, and you'll be going away to have a very plant-based dinner. Thanks all. Was there anything else from you, Lee, before we finish up today?
No. Just thanks everybody for coming. Last slide, for those of you who have maybe not seen the first steps or know or have the resource, First Steps nutrition guides are absolutely fantastic. They're downloadable, and they give you lots and lots of really visual, nice, tasty recipes. If it's something around portion sizes, if you've got vegans, packed lunches, things like that. Can't recommend these documents more. They're fabulous. But yes, thank you everybody, and like I said, any specific questions, fire them my way, and I'll see if I can support in any way.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. And there's one final little survey link in the chat, just to help us with our policy work as well in campaigning for policies that really help us all to provide better food for children, particularly in their first 5 years of life. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming along, and we'll look forward to seeing you again at a future Food for Life webinar before very long. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.